Okay, folks, what I'm going to do first for everyone in class, and I know this will be redundant for some of you, but I want to actually show you a console connection and connecting to a console. And let's see, just get you an image here. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is basically this right here. Is I'm going to I keep clicking junk. Here's your cable if you want to buy cables. But I'm going to show you how we connect a PC to a router using the wonder of the internet. But what I want to show you first, this is a Cisco 4321. Have any of you worked with the 4321s? This is the replacement for the 2900 series. I have to be absolutely honest with you. I'm not in love with this thing. One of the reasons I'm not is it has a power brick. I hate power bricks on networking devices. I like my power built into the device. But it is what it is. This is a replacement. If you can see right up here, it's a little hard to see with the cable in the way, but right up here, there's a nasty looking Carolina blue hole. And that is, I got to go this way, sorry folks. That is where the console connects. You'll also see, it's hard to see beside it, but there's actually a USB, mini USB port too that you can use. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a console cable connected, just like you can see in this picture, to actually a COM port on my PC, since I'm on my full PC. I'm going to plug that into this nasty Carolina blue, I went to NC State again, remember, nasty Carolina blue cable into the console port. And so I've got physical connectivity. Now this is what is called out-of-band management. In other words, we're not going over the network to get this management. If you have a laptop, you're not going to have a COM port on it, more than likely, unless it's super, super old. So you're going to have to go with a USB to serial connector. But once I've got this in like this, the next item is to open a terminal emulation program. Now one of your labs had you use Teraterm. I'm not a big fan of Teraterm. I use PuTTY. So here is, I'm going to actually take you into a PuTTY connection. I got to open up. What do y'all use out there? I use PuTTY, Super PuTTY, PuTTY, Tab PuTTY. I mean, there's all kind of PuTTYs out there, but
Teraterm.
Teraterm, use Teraterm, okay. This is what I've got is just PuTTY. You'll notice you can select either SSH, Telnet, serial. I'm going to click serial. Now, one of the things you need to do is you do need to click on serial, and especially if you're using a USB to serial connector, flow control needs to be off. It's not always going to cause an issue, but it will cause an issue with some USB to serial adapters. I could actually leave it on for my particular connection because it doesn't bother regular COM ports. But 9600, I am on COM 1. Now this is where people get in the most trouble, especially with USB to serial connectors. USB to serial connectors are bad to move COM ports every time you plug them in. There is a way to manually assign the COM number to a USB to serial adapter, which is what I do on my laptops. I assign it to COM 1 just to make sure it's always on the same place, or COM 3, either one. But be aware, if for some reason you plug in a USB to serial connector and it does not work when it was working on the COM port before, go into your device settings and check to see what COM port it pulled in, because I have seen them move quite often. All right. Now, we had to set up, by default, the correct speed for a console connection on a Cisco router is 9600 baud, 8 data bits, 1 stop bit, no parity, and just for poops and grins, I'm going to turn off flow control. Click open, and you will see here is the port. Now, a lot of people go, well, nothing's happening. Well, a lot of times you have to hit enter, folks. Otherwise, you won't see anything. Okay? So now you see that I am now in a router. Now, I'm in a physical router. So, you can see that this is actually a 4321 running a x86 64 IOSD Universal K9 image. I'll be quite honest with you, I have not used these 4300s much. I just got 3 of them in to start playing with. You'll notice there are no, here's one thing we'll have to definitely do is turn on the packages. You'll see there are no packages turned on, so Security K9 is not on, Foundation Suite, actually nothing's turned on. So we'll have to go in and turn on the images inside of this. So I might play a little bit with these different IP bases on, but that's it. I'll need to turn on security K9 to be able to do things like some of our tunneling and VPNs and things we do in CCNA security. But this is the interface for how you get into a router physically out of band. If you have, make sure your students can do this, folks. This is extremely important, that they can connect to the console port on a router. Now, I know a lot of people like to use packet tracer, but again, make sure they can connect the console cable, connect it to a PC, open up some type of terminal program, be it Teraterm, PuTTY, whatever, and get in. You will realize that when we're in NetLabs, that's one of the things I want to show you, we don't have the ability in NetLabs to connect console cables. If I want to go into switch 1, I just click on switch 1, I click keep, I open up, and it will give me a console connection. And what it is actually doing, I'm going to turn off my video now, folks, unless somebody needs to see the COM port again, or the port. Anybody need to see it? Nope. Okay. But you can see here that, let me change my font size a little bit and get a little bit bigger. And I'm going to make this a little bigger. I'm going to change my background. Here, this will make all the old. There you go. Is that better for all the oldies but goodies in the group here that have been using computers since the beginning? Nice green and black background. But you can see now I'm in the switch and I'm in the exact same setup. But the thing is, I never connected to the console. Now in NetLabs, by the way, on the back end, there actually is an access server that has a console cable connected into the console port of that switch. That when you click on it, it goes to a Java applet and it then pulls up this connection. Okay, so we are actually connecting via a console port directly into the switch. Now, inside of Packet Tracer, you can simulate connecting via a console cable. All right, so you can take and you can pull out a router. Let's just pull out a 2911. Let's pull out a PC. All right, and I can actually go to connections and I can take a console connection and go from the RS-232, which would be a COM port, over to the router's console port. Go to the PC, go to the desktop, terminal, 9600 ADM1, click OK, and you'll see I'm now connected to the simulated console of a router. However, again, unless students actually work with real gear and know that ports can move and there can be all kind of issues with opening up COM ports. I've seen PCs with different things already set on some COM ports, and so you had to move your COM port to be able to get your USB to work or to get your console cable to work. So be aware of that. Make sure your students do use real gear and connect to those to your devices. Any questions on those right there before we move forward? Do your PCs in your classroom have COM ports? How many of you have seen these before, USB to serial converters?
Yeah, I was about to say, we've got a bunch of USB to serial converters hanging here on the wall.
Yep. You also can get sometimes this, and Cisco actually makes these, and this is USB to RJ45. Cisco also has recently come out with, and I'll go ahead and tell you something that's really bad. Cisco does not ship console cables with their gear anymore. Cisco micro, or is that
so they stopped giving everybody the micro USBs that no one makes anymore?
Correct. They don't have them. You have to buy them now. Here they are. $15.25. We will sell you one.
Oh my God! I'm going to take all of them out of the closet and I'll let the students tear them up because they came with those 2901s.
Yep. They used to ship them with every one of them.
Yep.
Now let me ask you this. True false. You can have a cable connected to both the RJ45 and the micro USB, and they will both allow you in the console.
I've never tried it.
Never tried that.
Yeah, I've never honestly I don't know.
It will work actually.
Should.
Actually, it will not. It's either or. Now, if somebody's made it work,
on line 0. That's right. Yeah, no,
somebody made it work.
Line 0.
Nope. It will not work because there's only one console, and you either use the RJ45 or the micro USB. You cannot.
Yeah, because they both come in on line console 0, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So you can only use one or the other. So that's just a little thing to know, because what's fun is put both of them in there and mess with your students and make them troubleshoot it and say, why isn't it working? Or I tell you something. It used to be you could turn the scroll lock on, and it would completely stop everything inside of the console. In fact, I don't think that would work anymore. Let me find the scroll lock. Nah, but it used to. You could turn on scroll lock, and it would it would actually lock the console. That's one of the things we used to do to instructors when we were giving them hands-on tests. We'd just hit the scroll lock button and walk away and say, well, it's locked up. And you would be amazed the number of times they'll disconnect it, reconnect it, change cables. It was mean, I admit it.
You should have seen me today. I was trying to troubleshoot a router, and I was looking for my pause break on a laptop that doesn't have a break button anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I found pause under a function key.
Now, what you can do if that happens, in PuTTY, you can do a special command and you can break. You can actually, during boot up, so if you're trying to send a break command, you can right-click up here in the blue and go special command break, and sometimes that'll work for you to send a break command. So if you're using PuTTY and can't find the break commands on the keyboard, which I've had that same problem with laptops before, that's a possible solution too.
HP never has the pause button in the same location.
Yeah, HP's, ugh.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that.
I had to support those when I worked at another community college, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, they have the best material.
The what?
They have the best material for their certifications, too.
Really?
You get your certification to fix something, then they change it, and nobody knows what to do.
Oh, wow.
It's good for 3 years.
That's funny. Quick question for you. When you think about an operating system and you think about a router, remember, routers do have operating systems, and they function just like any other operating system. They're the interface between the outer shell where you actually work with the device, and then the kernel, which interfaces directly with the hardware. Cisco's iOS is Linux-based. Again, I'm very interested in this new 43 because it's even more Linux-based. But there used to be, one of the things I will tell you, we used to have 4,700 different versions of iOS. Now you can see that we've got, in version 15, it actually became a little more integrated to where you have one main version that has all the feature sets in it, and then you can turn on and off feature sets. This, I just noticed, and like I said, this is very interesting to me. This is a completely different version. It's still 15, but look at it. It's x86-64 Linux iOS D, which is very different than anything I've worked with to this point. So I'm very interested in looking at. Now this XE, I know that used to be on the, or was one of the software versions on a lot of the Nexus. So I played with Nexus some, well, a lot. But, you know, here we've got another version here. So it's going to be interesting to see how this works and what the differences are. One quick thing here. Why do we get this? Anybody know why it says this contains cryptographic? This one's got the same thing too here. It's probably usually reading green. It contains cryptographic features.
Yeah, there's laws that actually are around being able to export specific encryption.
Correct. And K9 images that are K9 are images that contain cryptographic features. And there are certain nation states that the United States government makes it illegal to export cryptography features to. And in fact, it would be illegal to give someone in one of those countries a copy of this version of the iOS. So, pretty interesting there. All right. Couple ways we can access the device. One, of course, is the console, which I just showed you, which is out-of-band management. Another way is SSH, which is in-band management, which means we're going to be going across either a management network or just across the network, hopefully across the management network. The good thing about SSH, obviously, it is secure. It does not send items in clear text. Telnet is in clear text and also is in-band management. In other words, it's going across the network. We teach students Telnet and then immediately tell them don't ever use it. The other thing is this auxiliary port. Don't forget it. It's a handy way to break into somebody's router if they forget to turn it off. It's also quite handy if you mess up your passwords and can't get in. Okay. Here we're showing PuTTY. All right, there's one. Here's Teraterm, another good one. Used to be everybody used HyperTerminal, but because it was built into Windows, but it's no longer built in. Secure CRT is another good one. I've used that one before too. So there's all different types that are out there. It really comes down to what you're comfortable with. I've used Tabs PuTTY. There's multiple versions, so kind of the flavor that you enjoy. For classroom, I just use PuTTY because it's a real small executable and it's free. So you can just go download it. Just Google search for PuTTY and you can download it and throw it on every machine in your lab. Now, did somebody send a chat or somebody just come in? Tom just come in, okay. One of the things I want to show you is I want to show you the different modes of operation on a Cisco device. Now, I'm going to start out, excuse me, on the switch, and I'm going to back us back out here. And you will see switch alligator mount, that's what I call it, or greater than sign. This is what is known as user mode, or user exec mode. In this mode, I can do a question mark, and you'll see the number of commands available is about a page and a quarter, okay? You will also see that I have pretty limited commands that I can do. I'm not able to really make changes here. In fact, you cannot make any changes to the device in user exec mode. This is a basic look mode. You can do some show commands. There's a show, and you can see, you know, some of the different things going on. A good number of things, but you can't see like running config. I want to see the running config. I can't do that. I can't do the startup config, and I can't make any changes. So if I try to go into configure terminal, which you will learn is how we get into configuration mode, it's not available. In fact, one of the things you will learn about using the iOS is the help features. If you know a command begins with, you notice first I use just question mark to list all available commands. But let's imagine that and by the way, Control C dropped me out of that. Let's imagine I know the command starts with C, but that's all I know. I can go C question mark, and it will show me all the commands that begin with C. If I don't know, I can clear AAA, I can clear, here's all the different things that you can do once you get into a particular command. Now, if you know, for instance, let's go back to clear. So I did clear, and I hit enter, and it said type clear question mark for list of subcommands. So I can hit spacebar and hit question mark. And now I can do AAA and question mark, and it will continue to go until the command is complete, okay? Now, there's no cache here, but it's going to, if I keep going cache, question mark, group, and so I can keep going on and on. So the question mark is extremely useful as a help command. But in this user exec mode, this mode right here, you cannot make any changes, all right? It is a look and see mode only, and it's the greater than symbol. Oops. In privilege exec, now by the way, the way you get from user exec to privilege exec is to type enable, and you'll see now this switch #. If I do the question mark to see how many commands are, there's 1, 2, 3, and some change pages. So you'll see we've got a lot more commands than we had before. We also have C question mark. You'll notice there were 3 commands before. Now there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 commands available with that start with C. So in this mode, okay, in this privileged exec mode, this is where you can actually have access to all commands and make changes to the device. Privileged exec mode is pretty much you are in root mode, unless you've got user access configured, which is something we'll talk about way down the road. So questions about privileged exec and user exec mode? Tom, how are you?
Good.
Good. So any questions about these? Because it's going to be very important. Now, one of the things I will tell you I really like about this new version of the curriculum is the fact that they immediately take you into configuring devices. We do not wait around until you're at the very end of the class to start configuring Cisco devices. Chapter 2 of the first course, and you are in here configuring devices, which I really, really like. It didn't used to be that way.
I do have one question.
Shoot, go ahead.
When we're done with this, can we put subnetting? Can we decide how this rolls, or like as an instructor with Netacad, or is it predefined, kind of like this is chapter 1, 2, 3, like in a book, or?
You can move them around however you want.
Okay, so I can move them to the front.
You could do that, and in fact, what I will do, see, one of the things I will do, let me see if I can do this. Let me go back here real quick. Subnetting is so important that one of the things I do, and I don't do it in this chapter, but I do it in the next chapter. One of the things you will notice, chapter 3 or module 3 here is actually protocols, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where I introduce subnetting, or not subnetting, but IP addressing. So I go ahead and start it. It's a little bit introduced here because we talk about actually putting IP addresses onto a machine. So it's a good thing to start introducing it in chapter 2. But I also like for the students to go ahead and do these basic configuration labs so that those hands-on learners in your class don't go ahead and check out totally. Your hands-on learners will check out. Your other learners, they're going to stay regardless. But if you can go ahead and get your hands-on learners building some actual networks and also introduce the basics of IP addressing, then once you get into this network protocols communications, you start talking about layer 2 and and actually getting into layer 3 and introduce it earlier. But if you want to teach this chapter as the very first chapter, you know what you do? You just pull it up here in front and move it wherever you want it. The only thing Cisco asks is that you cover the majority of the material in the class, and if you want to add anything to it, add as much to it as you want. If you want to add materials, you are welcome to do so.
Okay, thank you. I was just what I was wondering, because I don't know. I've found that it's easier to get CIDR block and stuff like that out of the way first, and they have an understanding when we go talking about layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4.
I actually teach it a little bit different. I actually teach what I call old school subnetting first. I teach standard subnetting first because I don't believe you can understand BLSM and CIDR unless you understand basic old subnetting to where all the subnets are the same size. I teach that, and then I say, okay, now look, we're doing this, and we set it up to where we're borrowing this many bits, and we've got all these networks, but guess what? We're wasting 30 IP addresses on these serial links, so what are we going to do? Then I do a subnet to subnet. So that's one of the places I kind of disagree with the curriculum here a little bit, especially in this first chapter, or the first section. I think you need to learn I call it classless subnetting, but learn it, and then from there learn CIDR. But everybody's different. That's my brain, my feeble brain is what it has to do.
Well, thank you.
But in your classroom, you teach it how you think it works best. That's what I like about the Cisco curriculum, quite honestly. Okay, so different command or different modes that we can be in here on the switch. Obviously, we're in privileged exec mode. If I do configure terminal, by the way, the tab key finishes anything just like in Linux. So CLNF. You notice it won't do it here because it is not unambiguous. But as soon as I hit F, it will then do it. And the reason being, there are two different commands that start with CLN, okay, and then terminal. And you can also shorten it. So as long as you get it where it's no longer ambiguous, Conf T will also take you there. Now we're in global config, as noted by the config here. And we can issue global config commands, such as setting the host name. All right. We have other modes. One of the things we talked about is accessing via the console. Well, if you have a console, you probably want to protect that console in some way. So you can go to line console 0. You can type in login, password, and then put in Cisco. And most times you put in password first. Never use the Cisco password. I just do that because I'm lazy right now. One thing I do always put is login synchronous, and I'll show you why. If you don't have login synchronous here and you type exit and then you start typing something else, let's go back out here. And then now I'm going to try to do a show command, and you'll see it drops my cursor all the way down here and doesn't give me a return. All right. But if I do line config t line con 0, type login, if I can type C, and I drop all the way out, and I start to do a show command, when it gives me this configured by console, from console by console, it will automatically drop me down and leave me right where I was at. So I'm not, my cursor is not stuck in the middle of the output that's there. So that's what login synchronous does for you. So I'd always put that on your con lines. So I'm going back in, oops, I can type, and you can see I've set up the console line with a password. All right. The other thing I can do is align VTY, and on a switch, we typically say there's 16. All right, and then I can also set a password, and I'm going to use Cisco again. Don't do this in the real world. And one of the problems that you have on VTY lines now, let me show you a quick thing. Do show run on iOS 15 and higher. There is a oh, actually, it's not on this one. Must be because it was erased. Okay. Typically on a version, and by the way, the do command lets you run commands inside of a configuration that you can't run normally. I'll show you that again in a minute. That is not mentioned in the curriculum. It's very, very useful. Typically in iOS 15 or higher, line VTY 0 through 15 has a transport input none, which means even though you've got a password set, you cannot telnet or SSH. I'm just going to put SSH. But again, if I want to do a show running config, typically you cannot do that inside of global config mode. Again, I'm sorry about my hands. I just can't type today. Typically you cannot do that. But if you type do in front of a command, you can actually run that command inside of while you're in configuration mode, which makes it much faster than having to drop all the way out and then come back in and those types of things. So like for instance, on the do show VLAN, I can do a quick look at the VLANs in here and then move on. And so very nice. You'll notice too that the config line did not change, even though I went from the console line to the VTY line, and that is because I'm still on a line, a console line. So that's two of the different modes you'll have. Line configuration. You will also have interface configuration mode. So if I actually go into a physical interface, interface FA01, you'll see now I'm in config-if, and that's on the switch. On the router, it's the same thing. It'd be config-if. There's some good videos here you can watch to show you some of these items here and navigating between different modes. We'll go through here. Here's the basic iOS command structure. It is a command space arguments. Just remember, if you can't remember the arguments, do the command space question mark, and it will tell you what possible items can come after that. So again, when you're looking at here, if I did a Control Z, dropped out, and I did a show question mark, and it shows me all the things that can go after that. Now see, oh, that's right, it's under show IP. So do show IP question mark, and it shows me all the things that are there. And then I can do the Control C SSH question mark, and then you can hit enter, and it will show you that SSH is currently disabled because I don't have it turned on. All right. So I'll be quite honest with you, nobody, I'll say almost nobody knows every command in the iOS. The secret is, do you know how to find the command in the iOS? On the certification exams, you just have to be careful that you're not spending so much time looking for commands that you don't get things completed as part of your work. So that's a big issue there. In our particular curriculum, boldface indicates commands that are entered literally, italics are arguments, and then you have brackets looking at other elements and those types of things. So when there's different items like ping IP address, you would replace the IP address with a variable or with something you place in there. Talk a little about help. Hotkeys, these are very important, especially when you start to do longer commands. So for instance, let's imagine I want to move to the very front of this command. I can do a Control A. You can see how it drops me all the way back to the S. Control E drops me to the end. The up arrow shows me the history. Okay, so I can actually see all the commands and the things I've used. And by default, it's 10. So when I do a show history, it'll actually show me all the different commands that are in there that I've been using. I don't use Control D, Control K much. Control W, erase the word to the left of the cursor. You can do that. So it uses a lot of the same types of keystrokes and things you'd use on a Linux command line editor. Control A, Control E is what I use in uppercase mainly. Control C will break you out. Control Z will drop you completely out of privilege configuration mode. So if you're in configuration mode and hit Control Z, it drops you all the way out. Or you can type end, one of the two. Control C will break you out of any configuration mode and return you to the privilege prompt. And this is just for if you mistype something and a DNS lookup takes place, you can hit Control and Shift 6. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, I'll be quite honest with you. Sometimes you just have to wait. I've shown you earlier in the session how you actually establish a console connection with PuTTY. Be aware that this is not one you can do inside of NetLabs per se. They do have, I believe, you can walk through and see a little bit of how they do it, but that one is not one that you can completely do in NetLabs. You need to do that with a piece of gear in your lab so that you can actually configure it. So NetLabs only supports part 2. It does not support part 1. So you don't. I would strongly suggest doing this lab in your own environment with your own gear. And then in NetLabs, all you can do is the rest of it here, the end table. So when we go to configure a device, one of the things we need to do is give it a host name. And that is completely dependent upon your company's policy. So start with a letter, typically contain no spaces, end with a letter or digit. Use uppercase, don't use uppercase, lowercase, doesn't matter. We use letters, digits, and dashes and less than 64 characters. Most of the time we do try to make it something somewhat descriptive of where the device is at, depending on, again, company policy. The command for that is host name, very simple. And then we want to secure our devices. And again, I showed you securing 2 parts of the device. One was I showed you securing the console with a password, and I showed you securing the V2I lines with a password. The other thing we need to do is we need to secure access to the privileged exec mode. To do that, what we do is we go into global config and we create an enable secret command. And for this, for what we use typically in these classes is Cisco for your console and V2I and class for secret. Now I want to show you something that's a little bit scary. If you look at the enable secret, it is in fact in an encrypted mode that has not been broken, okay? But when you go down here, you will see that the passwords you put in for the console and the V2I lines are in clear text in the running and startup config, if you save the startup config. To hide these from at least shoulder surfing, you need to put in a command. So you might know what that command is. Service password encryption.
Yeah, I couldn't unmute.
Now watch this. Now what's going to happen when we go down, you'll see it didn't do anything at all to enable secret because it's already encrypted. But as we go down to here, the passwords from the console and for the V2I lines are encrypted in the running config file and the startup config file. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you, it takes about 3 seconds for this to be decoded on the internet. So don't think this is actually very secure. But the good news is it at least keeps somebody from shoulder surfing and seeing your console and V2I line passwords. If you ever shared your console or shared your config with anybody, you would want to delete these out before you did it to make sure they didn't have access to your console and V2I line passwords. So that's what we're talking about, encrypting the passwords. And then the other thing we need to do is provide a legal notification, which is a banner. Passwords, uppercase, lowercase, are standard things. Alphanumeric, special characters. Okay. So here it is, privilege exec password, enable secret class, and then you can exit or Control Z. Line con password, line con 0, password Cisco, login. Don't forget your login synchronous just to save yourself from going crazy. And then VTY lines on switches 0 to 15, on routers 0 to 5 or 0 to 15. Whatever you want to do will actually create the number that you put in. Service password encryption will encrypt those passwords in the running and startup config. And then you can set up a banner message. Now banners are a little weird because this is where you've got to get your legal department involved. Banner, config, whoop. Banner, MOTD, and then there's a delineating character. Now that is the character that will be used to end the message also. So if I actually go do not and then put that character, that ends the banner message of the day. So this basically means start the message, end the message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a different one, and I'm going to say a little bit of ASCII art here, not much. And I know I messed up one of them in there, but you shall not pass. And usually I try to line this up and make it all pretty and everything, but we're in a hurry, so I'm just going to do it like this. And then I put a pound sign there. Now watch what happens. I'm going to do a real quick thing. I'm going to do a Control Z to drop out, and I'm going to do a show startup. You're going to notice the name's not right. There are no passwords. What's going on here? Why is my startup config got none of the changes I made on this switch?
You got to copy run start, man.
Exactly. You got to do a copy run start. Otherwise, you cannot. It will not save it. Right now, everything I'm doing is on the running config. So if I do a show running config, you'll see the switch name is right. Passwords are encrypted. Everything. If the power went out right now, by the way, I would lose all the configurations on this switch. Couple things. Here's how they teach you to do it in the curriculum. Copy running config to startup config. All right. That works just fine. You can also do a cop RS. That's the shortest version you can do and make it work using copy run start. Or you can go old school like I do and just type WR. WR is short for write memory. It's how I've done it forever and a day, and it is the fastest way to do it. They keep saying they're going to take it out of the iOS, but they're never going to take it out of the iOS. Basically, they made an alias for WR to be the same as copy run start. Now, if I do a show running, let's drop out of here. If I do a show startup config, you will see it's got the correct name, and it's got all the changes, and it would survive a reboot, okay, which is very neat. Now watch this, type exit. Now I've got to put in a password. You shall not pass. I have to put in my console password. If I'm going to go into privilege exec mode, I've got to put in class. So I have done a couple things. One, I have made sure you've got to have a console password to get in to user exec mode. I put a password on to get into privilege exec mode, and I put a banner on, and I put a host name. That is the gist of the first lab for this particular class, or for this particular chapter. Make sure you do a copy run start or WR. Again, on the exam, do a copy run start. No, that's the commands they're looking for on the exam. Be aware that the startup config does live in NVRAM, non-volatile RAM. So once you save it, it will survive a reboot. The running config lives in RAM, so if you don't save the config, and I have done this before. I did this not long ago. I made a bunch of changes to a switch, and 3 months later the power went out, and I made some Ether channels and some other stuff on a Nexus switch, and thought I had saved it, and 3 months later all of a sudden this one server goes offline and we can't find out why, and about to go nuts. And sure enough, I forgot to put copy run start. I forgot to save my config. after doing all the configurations on it. So make sure you stress that if you don't do that, you can really get yourself in trouble. And then when you figure out that you've done that, it makes you mad as all get out, because you're like, golly, really? One of the things I've done before too, and students get really mad when you do this, is you're going to have a hands-on final at the end of this course, and I have actually walked by while students are doing hands-on finals and turned their routers on and off. And the reason being, I tell them all the time to save their work. And in fact, before I grade it, a lot of times I'll turn them off and turn them back on. If the student has not done a copy run start, you get to see a blank router and they get to do the test over again, which does not make them happy, but just imagine if they're hired to be work on a network and they forget to do that, then it's very, very bad. Here, I think, Brandon, you were talking about IP addressing?
Yeah.
Here's a great place to start introducing it right here, because in Chapter 2, they talk about IP addresses. So you can go right now and start adding and putting in as much as you want and talking about IP addressing. This talks about just configuring static and dynamic IP addresses on PCs, and that's because it's part of this lab. I mean, you know, you're going to go in and configure an IP address on the lab. But you could also go ahead and start talking about 32 bits and subnet mask and all these things as part of the curriculum right here. Different types of interfaces and ports. Obviously, one of the things that you know here is that a layer 2 switch, you don't put IP addresses on their ports. You put it on what's called a switch virtual interface, so a VLAN interface. And this is just showing again the static IP address, which is one of the reasons I like NetLabs, because you do have to put in using an actual PC interface, not that fake interface that you've got in packet tracing. And I don't hate packet tracing. I love it because it lets you practice a great deal of things that you can't do otherwise, especially when you're traveling or don't have access to the internet. But being able to actually connect and make changes are important. Does anybody know why we use Windows 7 in the lab instead of Windows 10? Smaller memory footprint. That's the main reason right now. So that's the main reason. So DHCP, you can actually talk about that here in a PIPA if you need to talk about a PIPA, IP config. I will say this, one thing, some of your students may not, especially with our students, the first semester they have is this class, it's this intro class. And so some of them may need to be really brought into knowing what IP config/all, and you know, that's how we do it here. And it can be pretty daunting for students. So we had to spend some time here talking about DHCP and IP addresses. I love how students have phones and think they know everything about IP and about computers, but they've never seen an IP address. Now, on a switch, again, let me jump over here. For a switch, when I do a show IP int brief, one of the things you'll notice is that none of these interfaces are designed to actually have an IP address on them, because these are switch ports, or layer 2 ports. But you'll see there is a VLAN interface. Now, it's not good practice to do this, but this is a switch virtual interface, and you can put an IP address on it. Now, we will learn later to use a different VLAN besides 1, because by default, all switch ports are in VLAN 1. So if you do show VLAN, I cannot type, folks. I'm sorry. Like I said, hands just don't work like they used to. You'll see all the ports are by default in VLAN 1. So if you use VLAN 1 for your management interface and someone plugs in a port you haven't shut down, they're on your management network. So that's why it's typically we try to do something like int VLAN 99 or int VLAN 200 or whatever, and you have to bring up that interface with trunk link or something like that so it's up, and put an IP address on it. That is a switched virtual interface because there's no physical interface associated with that particular interface. Okay, I'm going to do show IP brief. That's what I need to do. It says a VLAN 99 that right now is up down because there's nothing carrying that traffic across a link. All right. So when we put IP addresses on switches, we put them on SBI. We don't put them on one of the physical ports. Now you will learn later how you take a 2960 and turn it into where it has routed ports instead of switch ports. But that's beyond the scope of this class right now. That's in next semester. Are there any questions about what we've gone over in Chapter 2? I do want to show you some stuff here. One of the things I want to make sure you're aware of, again, is when you're doing these labs, make sure you use the content that is inside of NetLabs. All right? So it's actually walking through and showing you to configure the host. And you'll notice I've changed some categories to simple view because I can't stand categories, but in my lab. You put in, it walks you through putting IP addresses in. One of the things I've seen on a couple of labs is some of you lock yourself out because be very careful when you're doing these passwords that you don't put a space after it, because if you do, the password will literally be class space. And I've seen that multiple times where people have locked themselves out of the router themselves. Other quick things to note that I always stress to my students: the banner message of the day should never say welcome or hello or anything like that. There have been people who were able to get off of breaking into networks because the banner message of the day said welcome, and they said, look, Judge, they were welcoming my client into the system. It should be something written by your lawyers, and it should be something that is consistent across your entire enterprise so that it will be something you could use to prosecute someone who broke into your network, should they decide to do so. Let's see, other questions here. When you do turn in your answers, again, if you want to, the actual inside the curriculum, they have form fillable PDFs. Just try to put them in a different color if you can. If not, that's fine too. You'll also notice something. I do want to show you something that you probably haven't seen, which is really cool. Let me see if I can find a lab. Hold on one second. I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see. Frank is not here. Keith, can I have your permission to show just, not your grade, but just one of your uploaded assignments?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What I want to show y'all that's really cool about Netacad is the following. You'll notice Keith has uploaded the document here. I can actually go down through here and anywhere that I want, let's say, and I'm just going to, let's just pretend that he put something in right here. He's got an answer. I can actually click right here and put in, Keith, this is very good, or not good, or whatever. So, and as I put comments in, okay, when that student goes to see their grade for this particular lab, they will see what you've typed in. So you can grade it right here inside of Netacad, which is really cool. The other thing you can do, which is, I think, neat, I'm going to delete these obviously here, but you can actually do this too. And it probably won't work because but you can actually leave a recording. Hey Keith, you did a good job on this lab, but next time, how about looking at possibly turning in the paper on time? That's a joke, obviously, Keith. Hey Keith, you did a good job on this lab, but so that's something you can do, which is really neat. That your current system may not be able to do, depending on what you're using for your management system. So be aware. I will occasionally put comments in here. You know, you've got you also do, you can draw on it, you can do things like that. So a lot of different options that you can do to do some things, and even putting in text. So just wanted to show you that because I think that's a pretty neat thing to be able to, that most people don't know about with Canvas and with Netacad. Okay. All right. Most of you have turned in some of the work, at least, for the first chapter. Just make sure that you, when you have turned it in, that you, when you do your packet tracers, you upload the PKA plus any documents. Do you have any questions or want me to show you anything else from the NetLabs? Any problems with NetLabs? Do make sure that you have Java installed and that you run through the Java test. Okay, I'm going to stop recording then.